Hello class. The choice items have been around for a long time, choice band since Gen 3 and specs and scarf since Gen 4. Despite being over 20 years old, these three items remain some of the most dominant in modern competitive Pokemon. The choice items are simple and effective. The choice specs gives a 1.5 times boost to the holder's special attack, the scarf gives a 1.5 times boost to speed, and the band gives a 1.5 times boost to attack. The drawback is that you're locked into whatever move you initially used. You've got to use the same move over and over until you switch out or your choice item is removed. This is a big drawback, but it's absolutely worthwhile. Especially in singles, where switching is a lot easier than doubles formats, this drawback is very easy to navigate. And with the exception of Pokemon-specific items like the Light Ball and Deep Sea Tooth, no other items offer anything close to this massive 1.5 times boost. But just because they're great, it certainly doesn't mean they should be used everywhere. I've seen many new players become enthralled by the power or speed offered by choice items, and they start putting them on Pokemon and or on teams where they don't belong. In this video, I'll first go over what makes a good choice item user, and then explain how to build using choiced Pokemon. The examples I'll be giving are from Scarlet and Violet Overused, the main format for competitive singles, but the information I give applies to all singles formats. So let's get started. What makes a good choiced Pokemon? Well, the most obvious and most important one is that the stat you're using the choice item for should be at least decent. I'm not going to explain this too much because it's pretty obvious. Don't put choice specs on a Pokemon with 20 base special attack. These items are multipliers, so if you put a choice scarf on a really slow Pokemon, it will still be really slow. If you put a choice band on a really weak Pokemon, it will still be very weak. The next thing is that the Pokemon should have attacks that are very easy to click and difficult to switch into. Choice Specs Dragapult Shadow Ball is a great example of this. There are no normal types in OU, so you probably won't face an immunity, and nothing 4 times resists Ghost. Now, there are Pokemon like Ting-Lu and Garganacl that take very little from Shadow Ball, but against a lot of teams, Shadow Ball is just a free click. Choice Specs Iron Valiant Moonblast is another good example of this. Fairy has no immunities, and Moonblast is an extremely powerful attack. Choice Band Low Kicks is another great example, with Tinted Lens that can click Knock Off, First Impression, and U-Turn without fearing that the opponent will have a really solid switch-in. The same goes for Gholdengo Make It Rain. Very strong and no immunities. It's a very easy click on both Choice Scarf and Choice Specs Gholdengo. I want to take this opportunity to address a misconception I sometimes see about choiced Pokemon, which is that they need to have a move they can click over and over again, often called a spammable move. It would seem like this makes sense, since the choice item locks you into using the same move, but this really isn't that big of a deal since you can just switch out. Specs Pokemon in particular often use moves that lower special attack all the time. Specs Raging Bolt uses Draco Meteor, Specs Iron Moth uses Overheat, Specs Gholdengo uses Make It Rain. Choice Specs and Choice Band Pokemon usually switch out after 1 or 2 attacks, so it's not that important that the move is easily clicked repeatedly. Now, it is still nice if the choice user has a really spammable move that you can use over and over again without switching out. Specs Dragapult Shadow Ball is great like this since it has a good chance to lower the opponent's special defense and encourage more Shadow Balls. Iron Moth's Fiery Dance can snowball out of control really quickly on spec sets. That's great too. But it's not a requirement by any means or an essential part of being a choiced Pokemon. Even Specs Dragapult and Specs Iron Moth very rarely stay in for more than 1 or 2 turns. So to clarify, having spammable attacks is not that important, but it is very important to have moves that are easy to click and hard to switch into. Specs Kyurem's Ice Beam and Freeze Dry are very, very easy to click. Almost nothing wants to switch in, ice resists are rare, and most ice resists even take a sizable chunk of damage. Choice Band Iron Leaves, on the other hand, does not have any easy moves to click. Assuming we run a set like Psyblade, Leaf Blade, Close Combat, and Wild Charge, you'll frequently encounter situations where you have to make a read. If you expect your opponent is going into Corviknight, then Wild Charge is the only way to do decent damage. If you expect your opponent is going into Galarian Slowking, Psyblade is your only way to do good damage. If you expect Kingambit, then Close Combat is the only good option. There's no easy click. You have to predict every turn to make progress with it. Iron Leaves has no equivalent to Kyurem Ice Beam, Dragapult Shadow Ball, or Gholdengo Make It Rain. That's partly why Iron Leaves, the very few times when it is used, runs an item that allows it to switch up its moves. Moving on, another great thing for choiced Pokemon is to have a pivoting move. Whether you're Scarf, Specs, Band, getting the stat boost but not having to pay the price is fantastic. If you immediately switch out with your first attack, you're not locked into anything. Dragapult uses U-Turn on Band and Spec sets, Specs Raging Bolt uses Volt Switch, Band Scizor uses U-Turn, Barraskewda on Rain is terrifying with Choice Band Flip Turn, even Scarf and Amorous using Healing Wish can be considered a form of pivoting. Pivoting moves in general are great in singles, but they're even better on choiced Pokemon. The next thing that's important for choiced Pokemon is their speed tier. This is most important for Scarfers, but even Band and Specs Pokemon need a decent amount of speed. For Scarfers, it's obvious why speed is important. The whole point of using a Choice Scarf is to become faster and outspeed things you wouldn't before. Generally, if a Choice Scarf won't make a Pokemon faster than the fastest non-Scarf Pokemon in the metagame, then it's not a good Choice Scarfer. For Choice Band and Specs, the importance behind speed is a little more complicated. As I've mentioned several times, you can expect Choice Pokemon to be switching around a lot in the game to mitigate the restriction of being locked into the same move. If you're switching around a lot, and you're not wearing heavy-duty boots, which you won't since you're holding a Choice item, you'll take a lot of Hazard Chip. On top of that, if your Choice Band or Specs Pokemon is really slow and threatens a kill, whatever is on the field can just attack it, weakening it for next time. If your Band or Specs Pokemon is really slow, Hazard Chip and the threat of being outsped and attacked by opposing Pokemon will make it very difficult to keep alive. Imagine if Kyurem could be outsped and hit with a Body Press by Corviknight. How much less threatening of a breaker would it be? Now, there are ways around this. Choice Specs Torkoal is pretty solid on Trick Room, for example. Choice Specs Galarian Slowking is also not bad, because despite being so slow, Regenerator keeps it healthy. The next thing that indicates a good Choice user is having priority. This is mostly just for the Choice Band and Choice Specs Pokemon. Generation 9 has more insane sweepers than every other generation of Pokemon combined. The cost of leaving one of those sweepers alive is probably the game. Being able to secure kills with priority moves often relies on Band or Specs. Scizor and Rillaboom's most popular item is Choice Band, and it's no mystery why. That Bullet Punch and Grassy Glide is fantastic for revenge killing. Hisuian Arcanine has incredible easy-to-click moves like Recoil-Free, Flare Blitz, and Head Smash, but part of what makes it so great with Choice Band is that it uses extreme speed as well. The last significant thing that indicates a Pokemon is a good Choice user is that it has Trick. Not as big of a deal as the others, but it is still very nice. The ability to get rid of your Choice item can free up your moves in matchups where you don't want to be constrained, but more importantly, it can put a Choice item on a Pokemon that really doesn't want one. As strong as Choice items are, getting Trick to Choice item is the worst nightmare of many Pokemon. Walls like Dondozo, Corviknight, and Blissey are almost entirely dysfunctional when equipped with any Choice item. Even more offensive Pokemon, like Kingambit, absolutely hate getting a Choice Specs or Scarf, since so much of the threat of Kingambit is in its Swords Dance. Scarf Gholdengo runs Trick almost all the time. It's particularly great with Trick, since it tricks the Choice Scarf to Pokemon like Tinglu, Kingambit, Blissey, and Clodsire, all of which, as you can probably tell, absolutely hate having a Choice Scarf. Darkrai is good at this as well, and its Trick hits the same targets. Some Choice users that get Trick still won't use it, but it fits very well on many of them. So, that's what makes a good Choice user. But before I get into how to build with Choice Pokemon, I want to clarify a few things. The first is that not every good Choice user has all the things on this list. Raging Bolt doesn't have any moves that are easy to click. Specs Bolt has only Dragon and Electric moves most of the time, both of which have very common immunities in Fairy and Ground. Raging Bolt also doesn't get Trick or Switcheroo. It does have a decent speed tier though, it can pivot, and it's insanely powerful. If you're in doubt as to whether or not a Pokemon is a good choice user, you can always just try it out on ladder and see how it feels. The other thing I want to say is that sometimes, even if a Pokemon seems well suited for a choice item, it may be better with something else. A good example from Generation 8 is Nidoking. It seems like it would love a choice specs, but because Sheer Force removes Life Orb recoil, Life Orb is a way better item on Nidoking than choice specs could ever be. Alright, now you understand what makes a good choice Pokemon. Before we get into how to build with them, if you're getting something out of this video, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. It helps out a lot. Okay, now let's talk about how to build around choiced Pokemon. Generally speaking, choice items fit best on archetypes close to balance. This may seem odd at first. More offensive teams like power and speed, so why wouldn't offense and hyper offense use the most choice items? The problem is that they lock you into one move. As I've said many times in this video, the best way to work around the move lock-in effect of choice items is just to switch out. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine your choice specs Dragapult enters the field against a Pecharunt. You go for Shadow Ball as your opponent switches into their Assault Vest Primarina and you deal 30%. Solid damage, and you're one hit closer to destroying their team with Dragapult. But now, what do? You don't want to take a Moonblast, right? You've got to switch out. But into what? If your team is a hyper offense build, you probably don't have anything that can switch into a Primarina. If you have an offense team, it'll be easier, but still not easy to switch into that Primarina. If you have a balance team, though, there's probably a comfortable switch in. This is why balance is the sweet spot for choice items. The more offensive teams get, the harder it is for them to switch out and mitigate this choice locked effect. The bulkier teams get, the less they appreciate the power and speed offered by choice items. There are exceptions for sure. Scarf and Amorous has seen success on hyper offense teams, but even that has more to do with the fact that hyper offense teams like Healing Wish support rather than liking running a Scarfer. While it's almost never a good idea to run choiced Pokemon on hyper offense, regular offense is a different situation. If your team doesn't have a solid defensive backbone, it's very important to make sure that your team can at least switch into the Pokemon that would threaten to revenge kill your choice Pokemon. I know that's a bit wordy, so let's take a look at an example. The offensive team you see in this background footage uses choice specs Kyurem, and it is definitely an offense team. Nothing has healing moves, and there's only a temporary defensive core of Galarian Slowking and Landorus. So we've got a choice specs Kyurem in the middle of an offense team. The key to why this works is that this team is ready for all of the Pokemon that revenge kill Kyurem. What is going to switch in to threaten Kyurem after it gets a kill? Iron Crown, Dragapult, Enamorus, Kingambit, Iron Valiant, and Zamazenta are a few that come to mind. Well, we have Galarian Slowking and Kingambit for Iron Crown, Kingambit for Dragapult, Galarian Slowking for Enamorus, Landorus for Kingambit, and Galarian Slowking and Landorus together do a good job of covering Iron Valiant and Zamazenta. It's okay to use Kyurem here because we're ready to switch into the Pokemon that threaten Kyurem. We don't have a super solid Ogerpon Wellspring switch in, but that's not nearly as big of an issue since Kyurem doesn't let that onto the field easily. Now, you can't cover every threat. If we face a low-kick Weavile, that's just going to be a difficult game. Every team has its weaknesses. But if you want to use a choice Pokemon on a more offensive team, make sure you give it the support it needs, at least against as many revenge killers as possible. If you don't give it that support, there will be lots of cases where you'll be locked into a move you don't want to be locked into, and you'll have to switch out on a threatening Pokemon you're unprepared for. Things on your side are going to die. Now, as important as it is to get choiced Pokemon safely off the field, it's also very important to get them on the field. Banned and Specs Pokemon in particular want to enter the field a lot since they're usually the primary breaker of the team. To help get them in, lots of pivots are a good idea, both fast and slow. Anything that clicks the pivoting move opens up an opportunity for your choiced breaker to enter. One more thing you should consider when building with Banned and Specs Pokemon are the common Protect Pokemon in the metagame. Anything that uses Protect can scout what move you'll use and then safely switch into an answer. Protect Pokemon are the #1 enemies of Choiced Breakers. In OU, the main Protect Pokemon are Gliscor, Alomomola, and Garganacl. So, if a Choiced Breaker is a significant part of how your team makes progress, make sure your team has other solid ways of dealing with those three, or you'll have a really rough matchup whenever you see them. Although it's uncommon, some Pokemon do have moves that bypass Protect. So a Choice Band Hoopa with Hyperspace Fury or a Choice Band Iron Boulder with Mighty Cleave doesn't have to worry as much about these Protect Pokemon. Alright, that's all you need to know about Choiced Pokemon. That's a lot of information, so let's go over a quick summary to make sure that you've got it all down. First, we went over what makes a good Choiced Pokemon, and that is, it has decent stats in either speed, attack, special attack, depending what item you're using. It has easy attacks to click, it has pivoting moves, it has at least passable speed, it has trick, and it has priority if we're talking about Choice Band or Specs. And we also noted that while these are all good signs for a Choice user, you certainly don't need to have all of them. Next, we went over how to support a Choice user. Avoid the extreme archetypes, Stall and Hyper Offense, and generally lean toward balance. Cover the common revenge killers that you may have to switch out on as you're choice locked. Add as many pivots to the team as possible, especially to support Band and Specs Pokemon, and make sure your team is ready for Common Protect Pokemon, especially if your Breaking Core relies on a Band or Specs Pokemon. If you enjoyed this video and or learned something, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. Let me know in the comments what your favorite Choiced Pokemon is to use. My favorite is Choice Band Hoopa Unbound. Well, that's all. Class dismissed.